Mr Speaker.
I call the member for Coogee.
Thank you, Mr Temporary Speaker. I rise to speak in support of the Universities Governing Bodies Bill 2011. Within my electorate of Coogee sits the acclaimed University of New South Wales, the nation's leading tertiary education facility. The universities have been requesting for a number of years changes to free up their governance models. In fact, the very first item on the agenda at my first meeting with Professor Fred Hilmer, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, after I was elected to this House, was precisely this. He had been lobbying the former New South Wales government for over 3 years without any result, despite the former member for Coogee, the former Labor member for Coogee, serving on the university's council. Mr Temporary Speaker, each day over 40,000 students and 6,000 staff make their way to this large yet very compact institution. And as a Randwick City Councillor for over 11 years, including 2 years as Mayor, I have a sound appreciation of the significant role the University of New South Wales plays in the economic and social life of that part of eastern Sydney. Most people would never be afforded the opportunity to learn of the sheer scale of the tasks that is the day-to-day management of such a large institution, let alone the strategic planning required for ensuring its future development, relevance and prosperity. Thus, it's vital that the most effective, efficient, contemporary management techniques be employed that recognise the increasingly complex task of managing these modern institutions. A key focus of the bill is ensuring the introduction of improved, more flexible governance arrangements for our public universities to help them meet the many challenges and opportunities that they are faced with in the current external environments. The bill takes its place amongst a number of recent developments in university governance and draws from these where appropriate. The developments include the Howard Government's National Governance Protocols and the 2004 amendments to the University Acts made by the previous New South Wales Government to implement key aspects of these protocols. The 2004 amendments were made to each of the 10 acts establishing the state's public universities to ensure New South Wales universities could demonstrate compliance with the national governance protocols and thereby qualify for contingent Commonwealth funding. They were also about good governance. The amendments at that time helped ensure a strong national regulatory framework for universities, with all states and territories making the changes. The recently endorsed Voluntary Code of Best Practice for Governance of Australian Universities is another recent governance development in the Australian context. This was shaped on the basis of the previous governance protocols and has been endorsed for implementation by the Australian Chancellors Group, Universities Australia on behalf of Australian Vice-Chancellors, and by all Australian Education and Training Ministers on the 27th of July this year through the Ministerial Council. A further development that the Universities Governing Bodies Bill 2011 draws on is the 2009 report of the Legislative Council General Purpose Standing Committee No. 2 inquiry into the governance of New South Wales universities, chaired by the Honourable Robin Parker MLC. The bill effectively implements a number of the main recommendations from that Legislative Council Committee report, including allowing university governing bodies to remunerate members, establishing a clear protocol for the removal of a Chancellor or Deputy Chancellor, providing all governing bodies with the flexibility to either appoint or elect their alumni members. All of these relatively recent developments in university governance in Australia and New South Wales that I've outlined have sought to facilitate improved governance arrangements and processes for universities in the context of the external challenges that they face. This bill does the same. The current challenges include increasing competition between institutions for students and funding, both nationally and internationally. International students comprise a very large education market globally, and Australia is competing for its international student load with other major education export countries, and New South Wales is competing with other states and other territories. Next year also sees the introduction of the Australian government's demand-driven funding system, which will inevitably lead to competition among our universities for an increased share of the key national university age demographic. Our universities now receive less than half their total revenue from public sources. They need to be more entrepreneurial in their approach to attract funding from a diverse range of sources, including teaching and research initiatives with other universities, both local and overseas, and in developing effective commercial arrangements with other providers. The last New South Wales Auditor-General's report to this Parliament on our universities showed that collectively, last year, they received $1.2 billion in income from commercial sources. The Minister, in his main speech on the bill, has highlighted this fact and emphasised that our universities are very significant businesses, as well as both major public higher education institutions of great strategic significance to the state. These elements are all part of the broader context in which universities need to be well equipped to operate. And the Universities Governing Bodies Bill aims to do exactly that by providing them with more freedom in the way in which they go about their business. The 2009 New South Wales Legislative Council inquiry into the governance of New South Wales universities was initially prompted by governance issues at one university, but was then widened to consider broader options and questions of university governance. The committee held 3 public hearings during this inquiry and received a total of 36 submissions. The inquiry's report contained 12 recommendations covering both matters that could be dealt with through legislative amendment and a range of related issues that were more questions of policy and practice for individual governing bodies. The key issue emerging from the evidence presented to the inquiry was that universities need to tailor their governance arrangements to meet their specific needs. The bill ensures increased flexibility for universities in determining their own governance arrangements, but this flexibility is not unfettered. There are inbuilt checks and balances that will operate in the arrangement that the bill sets up, and universities will remain, of course, accountable to both levels of government in a range of important ways. As already indicated, Mr. Acting Speaker, that the bill implements a number of key recommendations of the Legislative Council's 2009 inquiry. Other recommendations of that inquiry dealt with matters including the induction and professional development of governing body members, the performance evaluation practices of governing bodies, risk management considerations, and the National Voluntary Code of Best Practice for the Governance of Australian Universities that was being developed from the former National Governance Protocols. These other recommendations involved issues that were at a more operational level for governing bodies, and most of them have been incorporated into the voluntary code currently being conveyed to all Australian universities for implementation. The code was developed after a national consultation on the implementation of the former National Governance Protocols. Universities Australia, representing Vice-Chancellors, and the University Chancellors' Council assisted in the development and are now assisting in the implementation of the code. It was developed on behalf of the Ministerial Council by a representative working party and has been endorsed by all relevant parties. The Universities Governing Bodies Bill 2011 therefore forms an important part of a broad context of recent developments in university governance arrangements. It will make an important contribution to the future development of our universities. I'm very happy to support the bill.